Hello, everyone. Welcome to Preemie Chats. Preemie Chats is a program that is for healthcare professionals and parents to talk about what matters most to you, to explore new ideas, and to learn together. I'm Leah Whitehead. I'm the proud mom of Preemie, and I'm also a former journalist, and I'm happy to be your host today from Halifax. Preemie Chats was created and is put on by the Canadian Premature Babies Foundation, which is also well known as CPBF. The foundation is a parent-led charitable organization that helps families in and after NICU through education, support, and advocacy. If you have a heart for preemies, whether you're a family or a healthcare professional, I invite you to head over to canadianpreemies.org. And there you will find resources, the latest projects, and most importantly, a community of people who want to see our little ones thrive. Today's session is live, so please bring your voice to the table, leave comments and questions, and we'll try to address them during our program today. It is through rich conversations like the one that we're about to have that practice can be advanced and where we can learn together. So please participate. Let us know where you're watching from today. Now, today's topic isn't an easy one. However, it's one that we need to talk about because it's such a common story with many families. In Canada, we observe Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month in October, and there are things happening across the country to commemorate the occasion, including the incredible Wave of Light initiative that you're going to hear more about later on today. The title of today's Preemie Chat is Love, Loss, and Beacons of Light, supporting yourself and others through grief. We're going to be joined here in a moment by a very special guest who will share her very personal story of loss. She will also provide practical strategies for supporting yourself or a loved one through the grief journey. Kieran Powers is the proud mom of 3 sons. Beckett arrived in the world prematurely at 23 weeks in 2017. After a short but fierce fight, he tragically passed away in his parents' arms. Lincoln was born in 2018 at just 22 weeks and spent 4.5 months on what the family refers to as the NICU rollercoaster. Kieran's unwavering love and support, Lincoln's determination, and the dedication of countless healthcare providers all played a pivotal role in helping Lincoln grow into the thriving kindergartner that he is today. In 2022, Kieran welcomed Remy, who was born full-term via surrogacy. The heartache she has endured and the love she holds for her sons led Kieran to establish Beacon, an initiative named for her beloved Beckett and Lincoln. Through Beacon, she is dedicated to helping families find their light amidst the darkness of their struggles. As a certified grief and trauma coach, she specializes in providing support to those who have experienced pregnancy and infant loss, premature birth, and fertility challenges. Drawing from her own journey, she offers a unique perspective and understanding to families who have been touched by grief, loss, trauma, and heartache on their path to parenthood. And we're so pleased to be joined by her now. Welcome, Kieran.
Hi, thanks, Leah. I think you covered a lot of what I was going to say, and so I can throw that out.
I will put your presentation up here and let you get right to it, and then we'll come back for questions after.
Thanks so much. So as Leah mentioned, October is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month. We're currently in Baby Loss Awareness Week, and it all kind of leads up to this Sunday, October 15th, which is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Day, and culminates in the Wave of Light at 7 p.m. that day. So I'll talk a little bit more about the Wave of Light later. But that's what sort of brings me here today for this special Preemie Chat. So Leah did a fabulous job of introducing me, but I'll just sort of cover a few things. So yes, I'm the mom of 3 boys, Beckett, Lincoln, and Remy. Today, I'm going to talk mostly about Beckett's journey and my journey with Beckett. I am also a certified grief and trauma coach and the founder of Beacon. I started this initiative because after my experiences with infertility and loss and prematurely in the NICU, what I found was really helpful for me was, sharing my story, finding the stories of other people who had been through similar things, and finding that community and connection. And so I wanted to be able to provide that support for other families like ours. I think I'll just also say, given, the topic of this presentation, I have also experienced two other losses. So my first pregnancy was an ectopic pregnancy, and I lost the baby and the fallopian tube. And on our journey to get Remy, we also experienced loss through surrogacy with a miscarriage. So I've kind of had to navigate a lot of this pregnancy and infant loss journey. And so wanted to share sort of my story with all of you and what I've learned through that process. So today I'm going to talk about my little boy, Beckett. So Beckett was my firstborn son. He was born, as I mentioned, after I had an ectopic pregnancy. I started going through fertility treatment. I had lost my fallopian tube and some other things. And so went through the fertility journey, took some time, and we ultimately went to IVF. And on our first transfer, I got pregnant with Beckett. So the pregnancy was scary at first. Going through pregnancy after loss is a really difficult journey. But once I hit that sort of all important 12-month mark that everybody talks, or 12-week mark, sorry, that everybody talks about, I sort of was able to, breathe a sigh of relief. Everybody says, once you get to 12 weeks, it's safe. You're going to be okay. So at that point, I was feeling a little bit better. We started to share that we were having a baby. Found out we were having a boy when we had the anatomy scan. I was high risk because I previously had cervical cancer, but everything was going really well until it wasn't. So when I was about 22 weeks pregnant with Beckett, my water broke unexpectedly. I woke up in the morning and felt a gush. It's called preterm premature rupture of membranes. Not something I actually knew could happen prior to this happening to me. One of those very commonly heard sort of unknown things people don't really talk about. You don't really hear about until it happens to you or someone you know. Went to the hospital, lots of testing and everything, and ultimately was sent home and put on bed rest. Over the next almost 2 weeks, there was sort of a lot of in and out of hospital, series of complications, and ultimately Beckett was born at 23 weeks and 5 days on July 24th, 2017. He was born in the middle of the night. He's my little shining star. He thought we tried to resuscitate, but ultimately, as Leah mentioned, after a short but fierce fight, he passed away in my arms. So this was obviously devastating, and we were broken, but we did get to spend, 7 hours or so with Beckett at the hospital. And although this was the most devastating experience of my life, that period of time where Beckett was lying on my chest was the calmest I've ever felt. It just felt so right having him with me. And then I had to go home without him, and thus began my journey with grief. It was devastating for us. We didn't know anyone who had been through something similar before. Our friends and family didn't necessarily know how to support us, although, a lot of them did a really great job. But we felt really alone and really isolated in the experience. What I did do and found that helped me was to seek out stories of other people who had been through similar experiences. I started to tell our story on social media a little bit. I started to connect with other people who had lost babies. And that really helped me. I joined a support group and met some incredible women who had also lost their babies, and connected with them and stay connected to them to this day. Also got lots of therapy, very helpful, and found ways to weave Beckett into our lives, because even though he wasn't with us anymore and isn't with us anymore, he is still our beautiful little son. And so we find ways every day to weave him into our lives and honor him and make sure he knows that he's our little boy. Our now two other little boys know all about their big brother. And we have, celebrations and traditions that we do that involve him. So that's just, obviously, it's been a very long journey, and grief journeys don't end. So it's still, a large part of my story and something we continue to manage every day. But that's sort of a little bit about my little boy Beckett. And, he has done incredible things, even though he's not here. His memory kind of lives on, and in some of the things that we've been doing to honor him, he's had a really big impact on a lot of people's lives. So that's just a little bit about Beckett. What I'm going to focus on now for a little while is on some strategies and tips and things that I've kind of picked up along the way in my journey, as well as through supporting other people who have experienced pregnancy and infant loss. I'm going to preface this by saying that grief is inherently individual and personal, and everyone's journey is totally unique. So this is all based on my personal experience, as well as what I've heard and learned from people that I've supported. So I just want to preface it with that. So I'm going to start just talking a little bit about, a few tips for grievers, a few things that I have found have really helped me, as well as I mentioned, some of the people that I've supported. This is not an exhaustive list, but a few things that I think can be really helpful. So the first piece that I wanted to talk about is building your circle of care. As I've mentioned, and I think is a very common experience in grief, it can feel incredibly isolating, and you can feel so alone. That is something I think, we hear sort of universally about grief in general, and particularly this type of grief, because although we're getting better as a society, we still do not talk a lot about miscarriage and stillbirth and neonatal death and losing babies. It makes people feel uncomfortable. People feel like they don't know what to say. So it can be just so incredibly isolating. But you don't need to face it alone. What I think can be so helpful, as I've mentioned a few times already for me, was finding other people who have been through similar things, to have a support system that understands what you're going through. But also find the people within your friends and your family, your coworkers, whoever, who you find is able to sit with you in your grief, is able to just be there for you and with you in your grief, not trying to fix it, not trying to give advice, who can just be there for you and, connect and just stick with that person. Have that person be your person. Have that person be the person who buffers, any information you want to be sent out to friends or anything like that. You can have sort of that champion within, your current circle. This circle of care could also be, friends that I've mentioned that you meet through support groups or social media. I have met a probably weirdly large number of people on social media who I now count as close friends, and most of them have been through some sort of shared experience. Other kind of key members of a circle of care could be a therapist who can help you process the trauma and the grief, or a coach like me who can hold space for you and help you navigate the journey. The circle of care can involve tons of different things, but figuring out who those people are that you want to have in your corner can just be a really helpful piece of strategy to help you feel less alone. My next piece of advice is to stop shoulding yourself. It's so natural to get caught up in the what ifs and the should haves in grief. And that guilt that can come along with that can be excruciating. This one's really hard. It's easier said than done to stop shooting yourself. But what I sort of recommend is when you catch yourself saying, I should have done this, etc., etc., just catch yourself, take a breath, and try to be kind and gentle on yourself. Think about what you would tell someone that you love or care about if they were saying these kinds of things about themselves, and talk to yourself like you would talk to your best friend. I think it's really important. There's no should in grief. So if you're talking about, oh, I should do this, as part of honoring your child or part of your recovery of having a miscarriage or whatever it is, there's no should. You need to do whatever you need to do to get through this period. And you can't change what has already happened. You can only figure out ways to be able to move forward into, the future that you want for yourself. And then my final sort of tip for grievers for today is one that I have personally found incredibly powerful and helpful, which is to replace but with and. So, it's become abundantly clear in my journey that as human beings, we can hold a multitude of complex emotions simultaneously. And that can also be extremely difficult. So you can feel joy and sadness, hope and fear, empathy and jealousy. And when you're experiencing the immense pain of losing a baby, this can be really difficult to navigate. So, for example, after you've lost your child and then you go out and you have fun, there might be some guilt associated with that. Or somebody sees you laugh and then you feel the need to kind of tell them that, oh, yeah, that like I'm happy right now, but I'm still also grieving my child. I still miss my child, to sort of make sure they understand that this doesn't mean you're okay. So what I find really helpful is to say and. So I'm grieving and I'm allowed to laugh. I'm scared and I'm hopeful for my future. I'm happy and I'm sad. These things can all be true at once. And I find that making that little adjustment from but to and can be so, so powerful. Okay, so next I'm just going to go on to some tips for supporting someone who's lost a baby. So one thing I've been thinking about a lot lately is, they say it takes a village to raise a child, but it also takes a village to grieve one. As human beings, we crave connection, and we're not meant to go through the hard things in life alone. So what I'm sort of saying to, those of you who may know someone who's lost a baby, had a miscarriage, is experiencing, this kind of difficult time in their parenthood journey, is to be their village. So here are a few sort of suggestions that I have of how you can support a grieving parent. The first is to follow their lead. So what I mean by this is really listen to how they're speaking about their experiences, what they're divulging to you, what language they're using. So if they say their baby's name, use their baby's name. If they are talking about, using the words loss versus, I lost my baby versus my baby died, use the word loss or use the word died. Use the language that they use and follow their lead and follow their cues. This person, so you can tell sort of what their little cues are. If something you're saying maybe isn't hitting, or if you're sort of seeing there are different things they need, just follow their lead in the experience. And if you're not sure, ask. The next tip is sort of things to avoid. So just to say, there are some recommendations of what not to do when trying to support a griever. You're not going to break them, but these are things I advise to kind of watch out for. So the first is really trying to fix it. It can be when you see someone you love hurting, your natural kind of state is to say, oh, I want to fix them. I want to help them feel better. But in this situation, they don't need you to fix it. They don't need somebody to say, oh, my mother's sister's brother's wife had a miscarriage and is what helped her. What they need is for you to listen. So don't try to fix it or fix them. You can't. Just be there for them. The next is sort of in the language that you use. So try to avoid things like, everything happens for a reason, or my probably least favorite phrase in the English language is at least. So avoid saying at least, at least you can get pregnant, at least your baby didn't suffer, at least those can be really triggering and difficult to hear. So try to avoid those. And then the last thing is praise. I think it's really natural for people to want to tell people, oh, you're so strong. Oh, you're a warrior. Oh, you're surviving this. And while I think that's well-meaning and well-intentioned, sometimes it can be really difficult to hear, especially when you're in sort of the early days of grief, because the last thing you want to have to be is strong in this situation. So I think kind of avoiding that praise piece and trying to turn something, terrible into something positive can be just something to look out for. And then my next tip is around offering practical and personal support. So on the practical side, like this is a question I actually get a lot, is what can I do for someone? Specifically, what can I get them? That sort of thing. I personally avoid flowers because I think people get a lot of flowers. When Beckett died, our house was full of flowers and it was like really well-intentioned gift, but our house looked like a funeral home and those flowers died. The other thing we got was food, which was so helpful because last thing we wanted to be worried about was what we're going to eat or cook, but we got so much of it and I had zero appetite for a very long time. So in terms of that, I'd recommend like gift certificates for Uber Eats or something like that they can use down the line or when they feel like it on what they feel like. You also know this person. So, think of things that they might like. Would they maybe feel like getting a massage down the line or anything like that? And then the personal piece, I think, is more around how to kind of incorporate their baby into their lives. So if they've named their baby, getting them things with their baby's initial on them or something like that. We've got Christmas coming up in a few weeks. Ornaments with their baby's initials can be really nice. Necklaces with their baby's name or initial, things like that kind of like really personal it, and it makes them know that you're thinking about them and their baby. I actually make personalized candles for people who've lost babies. So that can be another really nice thing as well. And then finally, just be there and be there and be there. And what I mean by this is that the grief journey never ends. I'm 6 years on. Beckett died over 6 years ago. And sometimes something will happen or not, and it'll still knock the wind out of me. A lot of people are really there at the beginning. You get tons of messages and calls and cards and whatnot, and that's great. But then, a month on, those calls, those texts, those checking in, they kind of tend to drop off a lot. And that can feel incredibly isolating. So just continue to show up. You still follow their lead. You still don't have any expectation, but just, once in a while, a text that says, just wanted to let you know, I'm thinking of you and your baby. No need to respond, but I'm here. And doing that sort of on repeat. And then going down the line, remembering birthdays, remembering their baby at special holidays and special occasions. This is a lifelong journey, and having people that show up continuously means more than I could ever sort of explain. So those are just a few of my tips. The last thing I just wanted to talk about, so I mentioned the wave of light. So this Sunday at 7 p.m. is the International Wave of Light. So we light candles from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. in your time zone. And then it creates a wave of light across the world in memory of all the babies gone too soon. So this is for everyone. So whether you've experienced pregnancy and infant loss or not, you are invited to light a candle. And I would love to ask you to light a candle for Beckett, for all the babies in the world, all the babies you know or don't know, and join us for the International Wave of Light. And finally, just some contacting. I'm always around if anybody needs support. So thank you. I think we'll probably go to questions now.
Thank you so much for sharing your impactful, incredible journey. I'm leaving your contact info up there for a minute, just so people can take it down. Because like you said, connecting with people who have been there, it's important. And so I think, if people want to reach out to you, then that could be very helpful for them. I just have a few questions
Yeah.
for you. One of them is about you mentioned how Beckett is incorporated into your family life and how your boys know about him and his journey. And just as you said it, it sounded like it was a very intentional decision that you made as a family. And I'm just wondering why something like that was important for you guys.
So I think for us, I mean, as I said, he was my son, regardless of whether he's here or not. And to me, it just felt wrong not to have him included. And, Lincoln, who was born less than a year after Beckett, was also premature. They were around the same size when they were born. And there were so many parallels in kind of their journey, that it just felt natural to sort of make sure that Lincoln knew about him. When he came home, we would always say goodnight to Beckett before bed. We have a little bear that we call Beckett Bear that has like Beckett's name on it. And then once Lincoln got a little bit older and like started asking questions, but also was able to kind of understand a little bit more, it was really explaining to him sort of what happened and being really open and honest about that, because he's 5.5 now, and he has lots of questions, and I think it's important that we're honest with him. And so that was really important to us. And then we also make it kind of a beautiful thing that we do with our family. So we celebrate Beckett's birthday every year. The boys help us make cupcakes. We'll have cupcakes and spend the day. It's the summer, so we're usually up at the cottage. We have like a beautiful day just thinking about him, talking about him. The cupcakes obviously gets them super interested. And then at Christmas, we have like ornaments that say his name on it. And each year we buy all 3 of the boys ornaments that are on our tree. So just little things like that I think help the boys know, because it's such a huge part of our lives that it would feel odd in my experience. It's not for everyone. It would feel odd not to have him be a part of their lives.
Mm.
But yeah, so that's kind of what we do.
You talked a lot about supporting those that we love who are grieving. I also just wanted to touch on the healthcare providers who were with you through this journey. I mean, not only once, but you probably saw familiar faces when you were back in NICU. And so just wondering what advice you'd have for healthcare providers. What was particularly helpful that they did for you?
Yeah, so Beckett and Lincoln were both born at the same hospital, and we saw a lot of, the same people. And when we were in the NICU with Lincoln, there were people that came up and said, they were at Beckett's birth, like they remember, and like that alone meant so much. But I think if we're talking about being in the NICU after experiencing a loss, the providers who took the time to like learn about our story and ask us about, what's the rest of your family look like? Does Lincoln have any brothers or sisters? And like listening to us when we talked about Beckett and that he is, a big part of our lives, and then kind of weaving him into it as well. And knowing our context, because obviously the experience with Beckett shaped so much of our experience with Lincoln. As I said, there were so many similarities. So for them to take the time to sort of learn about us, learn about our experiences, learn about what frames our journey, I think made a huge difference in how we experienced the NICU and how they experienced that time with us as well.
Mm-hmm. Some good advice there for sure. I am putting back up because your Instagram handle, because I am an Instagram follower of yours. And I have to say, what I really appreciate about your Instagram is that it's just very real and you share just authentically, I find, what you're going through as a family and as a mom. And so I just wondered how that's been for you. I just quickly checked to see when you started that. It looks like you started it in 2020, and just wondering how that has contributed to your journey and what the response has been.
Yeah, so I started that Instagram in 2020, but I also was just sharing on my personal one before. And I think for me, um, telling my story our story, like my family's story, has been such a huge part of my healing process. It's not for everybody. I mean, I'm generally kind of, an oversharer, so works for me. But having that venue to kind of get it out and share, this giant part of my life with the world, my very small world, has really been extremely healing for me, and has also brought me to some incredible human beings who have, been through similar things, or are just like caring, empathetic people. And I've met a lot of really unbelievable people through sharing my story. And that in itself has been an incredible support for me. And then also, now sort of being a few years on and doing what I'm doing, I've been able to be for other people what some of these people were for me. So people, who are recently experiencing loss, or who know someone who has and want to know what they can do, will reach out to me. And that I just find really rewarding. And I think for me too, it's just another way for me to kind of honor Beckett and all of my boys, but Beckett in particular, that like we're, helping other people be able to share their story as well.
And you mentioned that you are now a grief and trauma counselor. And I'm just wondering, and maybe you don't know, but is it common that people who do this, the grief and trauma counseling, that they have actually been through something like this themselves? I can certainly see the advantage of like pulling in your experience and being able to really connect with people, but is that common? What kind of drove you personally to go this route? And was it your background before Beckett?
So no, I work in health. I worked in healthcare, but on the planning and policy sort of side of things. I think it is sort of common. So the certification that I did specifically was a majority of the people in sort of my cohort did have lived experience of loss. There's something called post-traumatic growth. So where, somebody that has gone through a traumatic experience, not all the time, but sometimes they will take that experience and use it as sort of a catalyst to make change, do something, in their life. And so I think it's sort of common in that way. That, that being said, like, it's not something that's expected or should be done or is for everyone. But for me, as I think just through sharing our journey and all the people that sort of reached out to sort of say, like, I'm going through this now too. Hearing your story has really helped. It kind of just made me realize, like, I think there's something I can do here. And yeah, so that's kind of why I did it. And I think it's not everybody, but it's not uncommon.
You had talked about in your practical advice section of following the lead of the loved one who may be experiencing grief. And I was just wondering, so it's one thing when the conversation is about, this big life event, the loss, how, whatever that might be. When someone doesn't bring it up, should we, as people who love this person, should we bring it up? Is that helpful? Or how do you follow their lead in that regard?
That's a really good question. I think context really matters in that situation. So, like, if you're at a dinner party and the person's talking about other things, then may not be the time. That being said, if they are at a dinner party and, I've been at dinner parties and I start talking about all of my stuff. So if they are, like, go with it and let them have it. Don't try to change the subject. But I think in terms of bringing it up without them bringing it up, like in text messages or things like that, like, I think that's a really good way. Like, I'm thinking of you, I'm thinking of your baby, or like their birthday, like unprompted, happy birthday to your baby, and things like leading up to holidays or whatever. Like, I know this can be a really difficult time. I'm thinking of you. Just like simply things like that, because I think a lot of people tend to think, like, oh, maybe if they're not talking about it as much anymore, like, oh, they're over it. And like, you don't get over it. And it can also just come up like totally out of the blue. Like, as I said, Beckett died almost over 6 years ago. And like once in a while, something will happen and I'll just be like, whoa, like, and it hits me and like, it takes me even off guard sometimes. So just recognizing that, this is a lifelong journey for them, and sort of just, it's really just paying attention to the language they use, paying attention to, are they talking about it? Does it seem like they want to talk about it? And being that person that is open for that, because not everybody is.
And finally, my last question, I wanted to just, with Christmas coming, with winter holidays coming, and you mentioned that can be a particularly difficult time, because it is the time when we kind of turn our thoughts toward family and togetherness. And just wondering what advice you would have for families who are grieving. And, I think when you're in grief and you are anticipating a big family event or a holiday, it kind of looms over you, especially when it's the first one. And so just wondering what advice you'd have for families who are feeling that right now.
Yeah, especially in the first year, that anticipation piece is often, can be harder than the actual like day or whatever it is. So again, checking in like on the lead up. And then I think, you got to follow the person's lead again, but say we're talking about, the like Christmas holidays or something like that, figuring out if there's ways that they might like to bring their baby into some of the traditions. So, with us, like I had always thought about when I had a baby, like they would get their stocking and like these are the things that would happen. And so, Beckett does have a stocking at our holiday Christmas, and it gets filled up with toys, which we then donate. And so he gets like gifts for what his age would be, and then we donate them.
Oh, that's a beautiful idea.
Thanks. Yeah. And then, I mentioned sort of the ornaments, like we buy ornaments for all three boys. And, ultimately the thinking is like when they hopefully in 40, 50 years, when they leave the house and get their own Christmas tree, like they take their ornaments, but Beckett's will always stay with us. So like there's little sort of traditions and, for other friends I know that have lost babies, I'll get them an ornament that has like their baby's initial on them or something like that. So and I think if you don't know, like ask. So I think that people tend to hesitate to like bring it up because they're scared they're going to like remind you of your baby, and it's like, nope, you're not going to remind me. Like I know what happened. I think of him every day. So like if you're not sure, ask them like, oh, we're going to be having our Christmas celebration. Like, is there anything you think you would like to include for your baby, or like that sort of thing? And just checking in.
Well, thank you so much for sharing today and for giving practical advice, because I feel like that's something sometimes the conversation lacks. And as well, even just talking about it, because like you said, we have come a long way, but there's more ground to cover when it comes to acknowledgement and commemoration. And so I really appreciate you being here today and to talk about October 15th as well, the Wave of Light. And I hope that those who are watching will participate and just remember those babies who leave us too soon. And so thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us on this Friday afternoon for Preemie Chats. A special thank you to our sponsor, AstraZeneca, for their ongoing support of our educational program. Just a reminder that if you missed any part of today's session, or if you'd like to re-watch it, you can head over to canadianpreemies.org, and there you will see this entire episode plus all the past episodes of Preemie Chats, and you'll find many resources and support options available there as well. You'll also be reminded that CPBF is a charitable organization, and it depends on support to continue its important work. And so consider how you can support CPBF in its mission to empower families of premature babies in every step of their journey. Together, we can create a brighter future for all preemies and their families. I hope you're available to join us next Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to be talking about RSV burden on preterm babies, prevention, and new approaches. And so we're coming into that season that's referred to as RSV season. So hope you'll be able to join us for that. Hope you all have a great weekend, and thanks again for joining us today.